The last two chapters, Parshiot, sections of the Book of Shemot, Vayakhel and Pikudei, again deal with the details of the tabernacle, the details of priestly clothes and dress. And most of us, in all honesty, find this both boring and repetitious. Why do we need to know exactly how everything was made, how every part of the structure of the tabernacle, its knobs and its loops and its knots and its corners and its blocks and its structures were all made, and what material they were made in, and how they were covered, and the clothes of the priests that they wore, their different names and their different functions, and all the accoutrements that went on them that they carried from top to bottom, including the breastplates, and the difference between high priest clothes and ordinary priest clothes. All these things seem to us to be very strange. And yet, if you stop and think about it, they're not all that strange. When you consider, we look back at Versailles, that great palace in France, or at Buckingham Palace and English royalty, or wherever you've had these Renaissance palaces, or indeed how the Pope functions. You have tremendous detail of dress and appearance and of environment and of beauty and of physical detail. And all of these were designed to create an atmosphere of royalty, of dignity, of power, of authority, for the people who were in it and for the people outside who looked in and saw this. It was designed to give them an idea of greatness beyond them, ultimately leading to the greatness of God above everything else. And in a period of time when people didn't have the sort of entertainment and distractions that we have today in our households and at our fingertips and in our phones and televisions, this was their entertainment. It gave them a sense of identity and of significance. Going into the tabernacle, going into the temple was a tremendous event. Greater to them then than Disneyland is today, but still something that everybody wanted to do. And it gave them this sense of pride and glory, and so it was very important for them. And this continues, this idea of ceremonial, which was an essential part of the Egyptian world, of the Babylonian world, of the world that they all grew up in, was something that every nation in their own way aspired to, and we in ours. And people sitting round the campfires, or at a time when there weren't other forms of communication, would talk about these things and remember how special it was and hope to see it rebuilt when it was destroyed. And that was part of their culture and tradition and hope for the future. And so, when the details are given in the Torah, they're given first of all to show how the design was, how the design was carried out, and whether design actually functioned effectively, rather like designing a car, then producing the car, and then driving it properly, instead of crashing it. All this was far more significant then, and we moderns think it's not relevant, but in fact it is relevant because all these elements are part of our lives, but in a secular way rather than in a religious way. But what the Torah again is telling us is that all these things can be misused and abused. One of the crucial garments that are mentioned when describing the priesthood is the ephod. The ephod was a kind of an overgarment, a cloak, which everybody had. An ordinary priest had a very basic ephod, and onto this other garments were added as you moved up the scale, except that on the Day of Atonement, the high priest, when he appeared in the tabernacle, appeared in the most simple white garments, a basic ephod too. What is interesting is that later on in the book of Judges and Kings and Samuel, the ephod actually can also mean an idol. It's a word that's used to describe how something could be abused. And again, all this reminds us that this finery and this glory has an important role. But if you misuse it, if you misunderstand it, then the whole thing falls apart and just becomes empty physical nothingness.